Doctor tells me no, and training and cycling. In the weeds. Yeah, Monday, and that's kind of like typical corporate language, whether you're in the weeds or strategic person. And even if you're, let's say if you're in a leadership role, they kind of they calculate the percentage of like whether you're like what is the percentage of you are in strategic and what is the percentage of you are in leads in the weeds. So you could be in the role where you are 100% in the weeds. You could be in a role where you're 100% strategic, and you could be in a role where you're, a mix of 50-50, where you're in a strong leadership role, but you still are in the weeds. And that's kind of where I would like to be. I think my ratio, if I was to put a ratio today on my strategic versus in the weeds, I would say it's about 80-20. It could be 70-30 depending on the year. So there are times where most of the time I'm like right here where you see me today streaming is my work office. And I can be multiple screens open, have another laptop over there, things going on. I'm working on things in the background, working with my team as they're out and about. And then there's those times where I'm actually traveling and getting a little bit into teaching the classes and doing some audits. And so getting my hands on equipment or working with people, so being in the weeds and not always up here in this strategic role. So I think, depending on where you are in that position, and there's not, I don't want to say there's a good or bad, but if you're definitely in a leadership role, you definitely need to be more strategic and kind of be out of the weeds. But it's also helpful if you are in the weeds because you are more effective at leading your team if they know, hey, this guy's been in that same position, and hey, I worked in the weeds with this company a good 13, 14 years before I moved more into strategic positions. So I know how to lead the team in a lot of those duties there. Yeah. And, and again, it's one of those things that you have to accept in your career as you are kind of moving up the chain into more strategic. Look, I recall the days where, I loved being in the shop, whether it was working for the school bus companies, motor coach companies, Cummins, Freightliner. Hey, I love those days where I could, I can give different examples like, hey, replacing 1 to 2 head gaskets on M11s, natural gas engines, because they were notorious for blowing out head gaskets, knocking out 2 a day, or when I'm working in the truck shop, fixing 2 to 3 trucks a day and I go home, then those responsibilities eventually change to where I'm still fixing trucks, but I'm also teaching people at the same time in the same business, at a Freightliner dealer where I'm more in an instructor role, helping people to learn to better troubleshooting applications and how to approach, different diagnostics and things like that. But, I'm still responsible for fixing a couple of trucks a day. Then that role changes to where you're responsible for teaching more, but you're in a regional responsibility for a major transportation company. And so then you kind of grow from the responsibility of fixing, hey, my 2, 3, 4 trucks a day to where I'm kind of responsible for about 150 to 200 trucks a day because of these technicians I'm working with and how much they are in And then you eventually move on to where now you're more responsible for 1,000 technicians and 1,500 trucks, you know, and probably 200 to 300 trucks that need to be repaired a day, and what the technician's abilities are. So it just kind of goes on and on, where you have to decide, you know, do you want to be in the weeds for the rest of your career, or do you want to take advantage of the opportunities to grow with more responsibilities and so forth? So I'm not going to lie, there's going to be those times, there are those days where I just tell myself, I miss those days where I was just responsible for 2 or 3 trucks a day.